Welcome back on NewsX World. I'm Megha Sharma and you're watching Focal Length, where we get you a briefing of topics from across the globe. The US President Donald Trump has often used trade as a leverage to shape America's foreign policy. He's trying to close a peace deal between Ukraine and Russia by incentivizing President Vladimir Putin. Trump has also been pushing China to come to a trade agreement, but threatening more tariffs has not really worked out for him in China's case. China has stood steadfast in face of Trump's tariff tactics, which has forced Trump to give Beijing a long leash. The truth is that the United States of America will not be able to sustain itself without trade with China, and Trump knows it too well. Meanwhile, the global south is also coming together to look for more attractive markets in face of US tariffs. BRICS is exploring the idea of reducing its dependence on the dollar, which could have an irreparable impact on the economy of the United States. Are Trump's tariffs, war, and the foreign policy of America intertwined? Can a transactional president like Donald Trump get his way every time using tariffs and economic penalties as leverage? What will be the long-term impact of Trump's trade war on the American economy, and are his policies pushing the global south further away from America? Let's start our conversation with a very special guest that's joining me on the show today. We have with us Professor Steve Hanke. He is a professor of applied economics and founder and co-director of the Institute for Applied Economics, Global Health, and the Study of Business Enterprise at the Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore. Professor Hanke is a distinguished senior scholar at the Mies Institute in Auburn in Alabama and a senior fellow at the Independent Institute in Oakland in California. He is a senior advisor at the Renmin University of China's International Monetary Research Institute in Beijing and a special counselor at the Center for Financial Stability in New York. Professor Hanke is also a contributing editor at the International Economy, a contributing editor at Central Bank in London, a contributing editor at the National Review, and a contributor at Fortune magazine. In addition to that, Professor Hanke is a member of the Charter Council of the Society for Economic Measurement, and currently he's ranked as the world's #3 most influential economist by Focus Economics in Barcelona in Spain. Thank you, Professor Hanke, for joining me on NewsX World today. And I'd like to dive straight into it. Of course, the Alaska summit has just gotten completed a couple of days ago. US President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart Putin have time and again indicated that they are interested in each other's economies and want to be in business with each other. How do you view these developments? Do you think Trump is likely to offer more trade in terms of a leverage, more trade in terms of an incentive to Russia in a bid to resolve the crisis between Ukraine and Russia that has been lasting for over 3 years now?
That's very hard to predict because Trump is a mercurial personality, and mercurial personalities are virtually impossible to predict what they're going to do. So I have no crystal ball in my hand, and I just can't make a informed judgment about what Trump may or may not do vis-a-vis Russia or vis-a-vis India, for that matter, or China, or any place else. The one thing I do know is that he is obsessed with tariffs. He thinks tariffs are not only the right policy to impose from an economic point of view, but he views tariffs and sanctions as leverage tools that he can force the other side, on the other side of the table, whoever happens to be there, he can force them to do what he wants them to do if he threatens them with tariffs and sanctions and so forth. So that, in that sense, that is one consistent thing. You can predict that he's going to use the tariff weapon. I think it is entirely foolish to pursue that approach because of two reasons. One, I am a free market economist, a classical liberal. One thing you didn't mention, I was Ronald Reagan's economic advisor, and I'm a free trader. So I'm opposed to sanctions, I'm opposed to tariffs, I'm opposed to non-tariff barriers, manipulation of foreign exchange rates, all of those kind of things that get in the way of voluntary transactions. I favor voluntary transactions without interference. And that's a principle. Now, there's a practical side to that too, and the practical side also indicates that sanctions, for example, like the secondary sanctions being placed on India right now, they almost never work. And the sanctions, by the way, on the most sanctioned country in the world, Russia, have not worked. They have not worked.
Right.
And when I say they have not worked, they have actually, instead of diminishing Putin's popularity and his power, they have increased Putin's popularity and power, and they've imposed enormous unintended consequences and unintended cost on Europe. Europe's economies are in terrible shape because they've been cut off from trade with Russia, primarily trade in the energy area for oil and gas.
Right. Right, absolutely. And you spoke about China as well. I do want to understand from your perspective this tariff war that has been unleashed by Trump. And China seems to be the only country that Trump has not been able to bully with his tariff threats. Trump, in fact, has shied away from penalizing China for the Russian oil imports. China is, in fact, the only nation that has gotten an additional 90-day tariff reprieve from America. What do you think is the future of U.S.-China trade ties under Trump?
Well, you have to realize that China has all the cards. China has huge leverage over Trump, not the other way around. Trump thought he had huge leverage over China when he started the trade war. Actually, the trade war with China was started with Biden, even before Trump came into office. And to some extent, even in Trump's first term, he was in minor military trade skirmishes with China, not military, but trade skirmishes. Then Biden extended those and made them even more pronounced. And now Trump started his second term with even more severe sanctions and tariffs and so forth against China. Now he's backed away, as you just summarized. So why is that? That's because China, number one, China has a lot of smart people in the leadership. And those smart people know the best way to deal with somebody like Trump is to play hardball with them. And they also know their history, and they know from Napoleon that you never interfere with an enemy in the process of destroying himself. So that's when the Chinese approach. And the card, the ace they have up their sleeve, is that the Chinese control a vast array of critical materials, like rare earths, like magnets, but many other things, by the way. And what does that mean? That means if China wanted to use that ace that they have up their sleeve, they could effectively shut down the U.S. economy within a matter of 6 to 9 months. And Trump has finally figured this out. Some of his advisors have told him that with China, he's playing with fire.
Right.
So that's why the picture looks a little different in China than it does in India. Now, in India, what cards do the Indians have up their sleeves? Well, they don't have rare earths, that's for sure, and they don't have magnets, and they don't have much else, and maybe pharmaceuticals.
Yeah. Yeah, those are things, of course. And do you think at this point of time, the global South nations, including China and India, Brazil, and others, are looking at greener pastures, more attractive markets, and because of the Trump tariffs, perhaps America is getting alienated from the global South, and can global South potentially be, a self-sustaining unit that does not require American economy for their own business and trade development?
Well, the answer to that is a qualified yes, because the global South, of BRICS, if you will, I mean, actually, India is leading BRICS, and India is leading the global South. I mean, they're in the leadership saddle, shall we say? Now, the problem with BRICS and the global South to date, it's mainly a talk shop. They talk a lot, but they don't do anything actually. So my advice, what should they do? They should form immediately a massive free trade zone where you would have free trade amongst Russia, India, China, and all the BRICS members. That's the way to fight the stupidity of tariffs, is to get rid of your own tariffs and clean your own stables. So and there's a lot of cleaning to do in India, because we have to look back at the history of things. And the history of things is as follows in India. You had, right after independence, well, who was running the show? The Brahmins were running the show. And the Brahmins, almost all of them were educated in London in the 1930s. Almost all of them were hardcore socialists and interventionists and leftists. And those elements were all injected into the Indian constitution, actually. That's what the Brahmins brought with them. A lot of smart people with a lot of bad ideas in their heads. That basically was the Brahmins of that generation. Now, that has never really gone away in India. There have been reforms starting in the 1990s, but the underlying elements are still in place in India. So in India, if you actually look at India's trade policies and non-tariff barriers and things like that, they're a disaster.
Okay.
So step one is that if India is leading BRICS in the global South, they should lead by cleaning their own house.
Okay.
And the second thing they should do is start advocating free trade. It's kind of ironic, because the free traders in BRICS are who? It's the communists. It's China. China is the most free trade country in the global South, and they're a communist country. India is not so good when it comes to trade and interventionism, and they're a huge democracy.
Do you think U.S. President at this point of time is also not too happy with how the trade negotiations with India is coming along, particularly about the protectionism policies that India has continued to put its foot down on when it comes to the fisheries sector, the dairy sector, as well as the agriculture sector?
That's part of the picture, but I think a small part. I think one reason that this has gotten to the stage that it is that a narrative. There's something called narrative economics, and the narrative is that, and this is really coming mainly from Peter Navarro in the White House. And the narrative, as far as India is concerned, is that India is buying all this discounted oil from Russia, and that is de facto financing the war machine that Russia has, and is pointing at Ukraine. So that's the narrative. That's part of the picture. These annoyances with tariffs, that's another part of the picture. Another part of the picture is most recently there's been a pivot in Washington from India to Pakistan. Now, what's that all about? That's all about air bases in Pakistan, and the fact that the U.S. wants to use these air bases if, in fact, there's a second attack on Iran, on Tehran. Those air bases, they're only 10 minutes from Iran, something like that. So why do you think the field marshal in in Pakistan has been in the United States 2 times in the last month, one time having lunch with President Trump, of all things?
Right. Right, absolutely. Yes, it does amount to the alienation that the American government has now effectively made with India in its strive to come closer to Pakistan. But do you think this making this move and coming closer to Pakistan at the cost of losing a natural partner like India will have adverse impacts on American economy in the long term?
Yes, I do. And I think the U.S. economy, and this is one reason that I think India should play its cards smartly and follow Napoleon's advice. Never interfere with an enemy in the process of destroying himself, because Trump's trade policies are big negative for the United States, big negative. And it turns out that in addition to those negative tariff policies in the United States, that monetary policy has not been good. And as a result of the contraction we've had in the money supply in the United States, we are on the verge of entering a recession in the United States. So when that happens, Trump won't be looking as good. Trump's popularity will be diminished. His power will be diminished. And the picture will start changing. And that's why, again, back to Napoleon, never interfere with an enemy in the process of destroying himself.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Professor Hanke, for speaking to us, sharing your analysis and giving us that very detailed insight into the Trump tariffs and its impact on the global economies of the world, on India, and of course in the domestic market in United States of America. Well, with that, it's a wrap on this episode of Focal Length. For more news and international updates, stay tuned on NewsX World.